James Darnell was a lifelong television enthusiast. A man who prided himself on exploring every channel his satellite service offered. On a dreary Sunday afternoon, while the rain pelted against his windows, James sat in his dimly lit living room, mindlessly flipping through his endless lineup of channels. Most of them were static or uninspiring reruns. Just as he considered giving up, he noticed something peculiar. Channel 000. It was not a channel he remembered seeing before. The number was an anomaly, nestled between local access stations and pay-per-view. Curious, he selected it. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy image of a living room. James tilted his head, squinting. It took a moment before his stomach dropped. He recognized the layout. The old bookshelf in the corner, the lopsided lampshade, and even the stain on the carpet near the coffee table. It was his living room. The camera angle was strange, as if mounted high up in the corner of the ceiling, capturing everything in a slightly distorted fisheye view. Sitting at the center of the screen was a figure. James leaned closer and felt the hairs on his arms rise. It was him. James watched as the on-screen version of himself flipped through channels, mirroring his exact movements. He waved at the screen tentatively. A half-second later, his doppelganger waved back. At first, he laughed nervously, thinking it had to be some kind of elaborate prank or a technical glitch. But the realism was uncanny. The image was too clear, the actions too precise. He picked up his coffee mug and deliberately threw it across the room. The mug shattered against the wall. And on screen, the exact same thing happened, but just a heartbeat later. James's amusement faded into unease. The delay grew shorter with every passing second. Soon, his movements and the screens became perfectly synchronized. James raised his hand slowly, testing the synchronization. The on-screen James followed in perfect unison. But then, something unexpected happened. The James on the screen moved first. James froze. But the figure on the screen did not. It turned its head slowly, as if to look directly at him, and smirked. James felt his heart pound. He didn't smirk, but his lips curled involuntarily into the same unsettling grin. "Okay, this isn't funny," he muttered aloud, his voice shaky. The figure on the screen spoke at the same time, but not in his voice. The words came out distorted, as if spoken through static. James felt his body begin to move, not by his own will. He stood up, mirroring the figure on screen. "Stop this!" he shouted, trying to fight against the invisible force. His body didn't listen. The James on the screen tilted its head, observing him like a predator sizing up prey. Then, it reached for something James hadn't noticed before. A remote control, larger and more sinister looking than the one James held in his hand. "No!" James screamed. The figure pressed a button, and James's world began to distort. The room around him flickered like a dying light bulb. He felt his body being pulled forward, as though sucked into the screen. He reached out desperately, but his hands passed through the air and disappeared into darkness. When James opened his eyes, he found himself staring at his living room from a new vantage point. High up in the corner, looking down, he tried to move, but he couldn't. His limbs were frozen, his voice trapped. Below him, the figure that had replaced him, an identical copy, picked up the coffee mug shards from the floor, chuckling softly. The screen on the TV flickered once more. Channel 000 disappeared, replaced by static. Elsewhere, someone scrolling through their TV lineup paused. They noticed an unfamiliar entry. Channel 000. Curious. They clicked. The screen flickered to life. It showed a familiar living room.